Hey there, sports psych enthusiasts. I'm Dr. Colin Fehr, and I want to share my passion with you. I love talking about ways to unleash the power of the mind. This recording is part of a larger lecture series I've created in an effort to make sports psychology concepts more accessible to a larger audience. The information contained in this series is especially well suited for students of sports psychology and is presented in a way that makes for easy listening for all. Welcome to Sports Psych Concepts.
Howdy, everyone. Thank you for being here for another Sports Psych Concepts lecture recording. I enjoy this series and I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Today, I want to continue on with my line of thinking on sports psychology for coaches and really kind of a mini series within the overall series. And today, I'm going to explore a few of the core pillars of just effective sport coaching overall. So building strong relationships, providing meaningful support, and leveraging the positive influence that coaches can have. So I'm going to dive into each of these concepts rooted in the sports psychology principles and ideas behind them to hopefully give coaches some ideas of how to enhance their practice and then ultimately in turn from that, the experiences of their athletes. So as coaches, and I link myself into that category as well. So as coaches, we often focus on the X's and O's, right? The technical skills, the tactical strategies. However, the true essence of coaching really in many ways lies in our ability to connect with our athletes and hopefully positively impact them. So as I go through more of this presentation, just know my goal is to move beyond those technical aspects of sport. Not because they're not important, because they are important. The X's and O's absolutely are important. But the focus of this presentation is on the interpersonal skills that are just so important for long-term athlete development and yes, success and performance as well. So we're going to look at how our relationships as coaches, our relationships with athletes and the support that we offer, the climate we create, how those things influence their psychological state and performance. Now, to start, at the heart of coaching itself really is the coach-athlete relationship. And this is a topic that's close to my heart because I did my doctoral dissertation on this. And there's some great researchers out there. And really the way to think about the coach-athlete relationship is a dynamic process. It's not just some sort of static thing. Oh, there's two people and there's some unique connection here because it's within this particular context of the sporting world. It is a dynamic process. So when I say that, I'm saying, well, we're talking about how the coach and the athlete are thinking and how they're feeling and then what they're actually doing with their behaviors. So how those things are interconnected. It's really a two-way street here. And the quality of this relationship can, of course, be influenced by both individuals, just like any other relationship. And so there's some prominent researchers out there that have come up with the three C's, right? The three C's plus one is one of the models. This is Jowett and colleagues out there if you want to go and kind of look into this a little bit more. But so there's three C's. There's commitment, complementarity, and closeness. And then the fourth C, technically the plus one, would be co-orientation, just how these things align. But so is there a commitment to mutual goals? Does the coach feel that? Does the coach think the athlete feels that? Does the athlete feel that? Does the athlete feel like the coach thinks that, right? So the commitment is really actually more kind of like the thinking thing. And so complementarity is how their behaviors match, how they work together, and the sense of closeness and mutual respect. That's more of the feeling element is one way to think about that. So ultimately, key takeaway on this is that a strong relationship, it's going to benefit both people. There's going to be better communication, there's going to be better trust, and ultimately better performance, which is what we want down the road. Okay, so just a foundational thing to understand and to think about this in this more sort of nuanced way. So now let's talk about some of the key factors that influence the quality of the coach-athlete relationship. Now, this will not be an exhaustive list, but it will be some that I think are particularly important. So the first is communication, which is kind of an obvious one. Maybe you would have guessed that one. That's not really a surprise, I wouldn't think. But obviously, when we have open, honest, and frequent communication, that's what builds trust and understanding. So on a foundational level, we want to be transparent, we want to be honest, tell the truth, and we want to engage frequently in communication. Don't leave these long periods of time where athletes are wondering what is going on or what the coach is thinking and they don't really understand the logic. We want to be willing to explain those things and have those conversations. And so, as a part of any type of relationship, there may also be conflict, even if there is communication. I mean, communication is a lot of times where that conflict plays out. It can be a source of that for sure as well. Okay, but the important thing here is that the coach and the athlete need to understand how they're going to navigate those disagreements, because how they navigate those disagreements is critical to the quality of the relationship. So when that conflict is managed constructively, that can actually deepen the bond. Just like any other relationship, right? You get through a hard time together, you get through some sort of disagreement, you come out on the other end, and now the relationship is stronger than it was before. Now, if we go in the other direction and we avoid the conflict, we don't want to have the conversation, that can lead to resentment and disengagement, which we really, really don't want that. It's uncomfortable for the relationship, not great for the team, not great for performance, which we're definitely interested in that. And then lastly, how the coach behaves just on their own, how they're acting, what their overall communication style is. Are they more of a controlling coach or more autonomy supportive? Those things are central to the relationship as well. So how we communicate, manage conflict, and then just our overarching style and how we carry ourselves. All of those things are very important factors that will affect this coach-athlete relationship. So now we will shift away from the individual to the team level. And we've got to start with the classic, the concept of team cohesion here. Coaches are interested in this. It makes sense. And so we can define this. It's just like the coach-athlete relationship. This is also a dynamic process. It's not some static thing. But essentially, when there's team cohesion, the group is united. And they're united on their pursuit of their goals. And essentially being a member of that team is satisfying. It satisfies some of their basic needs. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when I say cohesion. There's that sense of unity and this desire for the athletes to want to be a member of the team. Now, we also can extend this into two distinct types of cohesion. We can extend the discussion on it. So you have task cohesion and you have social cohesion. So task cohesion is really all about the team's focus on achieving whatever their shared objectives or goals are, right? They want to win, they want to execute a certain play. They want to accomplish certain things that they've set together. That's what task cohesion is. They work really well together toward achieving a particular goal. Where social cohesion refers more to the personal bonds and friendships within the team. Okay, now in an ideal setting, both of these are going to be, present. And it would make sense that we have both of these. That's going to be reflective of a healthy, high performing group. Now, there is some evidence out there that it's possible to be a high performing team in terms of goal achievement with teams that have high task cohesion and their social cohesion is lower. However, there is also evidence to suggest that while it's still better, and social cohesion maybe is linked with performance, maybe not as strongly as task cohesion. So this is one of those things in the literature that continues to be sorted out, but some interesting discussion on that. But the key takeaway here is that, ideally we want to develop both of these things, and many coaches will focus a lot of effort on the task cohesion, or many coaches will focus a lot of effort on the social cohesion, and it can be kind of hard, like, well, how much do we spend our time? Is it like a 50-50, or is it really, it just needs to be 80% task cohesion and 20% social cohesion? We dedicate our time to that, and that can be enough. And so it can be hard to think about it that way. So I'm not suggesting that. It's just that where a lot of coaches' minds go is, oh, well, how do I how do I quantify this? How do I break this down into actionable steps and time that I want to spend? And ultimately, you can develop both of them uh, together, but then also separately. And so the key takeaway again is just try and develop both of them. Okay, be intentional about that. And there's a lot of resources on the web and things that you can do. Social cohesion, you're having team dinners, gatherings, doing some things that maybe aren't as related to the sport so they understand each other. Task cohesion, those things can happen at practice and working and accomplishing those goals together. So I want to extend those ideas a little bit now that I just mentioned. Like, what are some strategies to build a united team, to establish that unity? And the first thing I'll say is that what you do as a coach, how you act as a coach, is a powerful driver for team cohesion by itself. So irrespective of what the team's doing and what they're bringing to it, the coach is a huge driver for whether that unity is established. So how do you establish that, right? Well, you demonstrate fairness in how you treat the athletes. It doesn't mean you treat every single athlete the same, but you do treat them fairly in the treatment that they need, what is warranted. They're not all going to have the same needs, but you still can treat them fairly. Okay, and then you also act with integrity. You say you're going to do something, you do those things. That's how you build that foundation of trust. Okay, so just on a basic sense, how you behave and how you act and treat athletes, that's really a key driver for cohesion on its own. Now, goal setting is also important, especially when it's a collaborative process where you're working with the athletes to set those goals, especially if it's team goals, you're involving them. You're not just handing it down to them, or at least you're providing opportunities for them to identify with those goals and internalize them as their own, even if they didn't have as much. Like if you more directed that a little bit, you could still get buy-in that way. Okay, but it helps align the team around that common purpose. And so the coach plays an essential role in articulating what that common purpose is taking and summarizing and integrating the perspectives and uniqueness of the athletes on the team, and doing that to say, all right, here's what makes us unique, and this is how we're working toward our common goal. Now, I alluded to this a little bit before. There's different team building activities that we can do. Many times these can be social outings. A lot of mental performance consultants will come in and do sort of problem solving exercises. I like to do things that have some sort of element of competition to see what goes on there in those things. But there's tons of resources on the internet that can give you ideas of things to do with that. But all of these things, you can strengthen both the task and social cohesion when we're doing those things. And so the last thing I'll mention then with that is that it's important to remember that whatever the interventions are that we're using, they shouldn't just be one and done things. A lot of coaches do this where they have team building at the beginning of the season. They have icebreakers. They'll have like a team camp or a retreat or something where they have a weekend before the season starts and they get together, and those things are all meaningful and great and awesome. It's just then there has to be continuity from the momentum that's generated from that to carry it through the season, because the one and done things just don't tend to persist. So it needs to be some long-term intervention or approach to where you have that continuity. Okay, so we have the coach-athlete relationship. We have team cohesion as some primary pillars here that we're talking about, some of the interpersonal dimension that coaches can do to enhance their athletes' experience, their well-being, and their performance. And social support is another one. And this is obviously tied to well-being and performance, but we can I'll give you a definition here just to make sure we're on the same page on this. So essentially, social support, when I say this, there's some sort of exchange of resources. Okay, and resources can be described in lots of different ways. It doesn't just have to be like some tangible thing, like you're giving somebody money or food or anything like that. It's just some resource that you have. It could be enthusiasm, a kind word, or encouragement, right? That would fall into this category. But where the intention of that exchange is to enhance the other person's well-being, or in this case, the athlete's well-being. Okay, so like I said, it can take many forms. So this is not exhaustive, but we could say, well, what is tangible support? What is informational support or emotional support if we do want to classify these? So tangible support, that's more that practical assistance that we can provide. So if you're helping athletes with travel arrangements, say you're working with a youth sports club and the team's going to travel, you got this tournament, and so you look into getting a hotel rate or something like that. You communicate this with the parents and you provide that tangible assistance right there. Okay, it can be things like that. It can be like, I've carried athletes' bags before. Okay, it could be something like that. You go and you get the ice, you wrap them with the ice after you have a competition where you're away from where they can't get to the training room, right? But you still have ice and things like that. Okay, that's the type of support that would fall under the tangible support category. Then we also have informational support. This one's a little bit more self-explanatory, I think, as you're giving guidance, you're providing advice, you're providing tips on technique. Okay, just informational support or access to, or not access to resources, but information about resources. Hey, we have this sports psych consultant who works on campus or who is in town, and I know this person and can get you connected with them. I can provide, here's the information, right? So you've got that informational support would be an example. And then we have emotional support. So this would just be like, we're showing that we care, we're connecting, we're putting ourselves in our athlete's shoes and showing empathy. We're checking in on them after a tough loss. We have that follow-up text message, okay, just to see how they're doing. And that's, I mean, it's really that simple in today's world with the devices that we have and access to connect and contact with each other. But all of these are they may serve slightly different purposes, but they're all sources of social support and they're all vital, and coaches can provide these things to really make a difference for athletes. So how about the coach itself as a support system? Okay, we can just zoom back out. There's some specific types of social support, but let's just look at the coach. I mean, the coach is a significant figure in an athlete's life and totally a key source of support. So it's really important to recognize that and embrace it so you can provide support effectively to those athletes. So not only are coaches like a direct provider to the athlete and what they need, they also can help foster that broader support network that I was talking about. You have connections, so you can encourage them to lean on their teammates or lean on the family or lean on friends, or if they're injured they can, or they're trying not to get injured, they're doing prehabilitation, doing those things with an athletic trainer. Maybe they have access to a mental performance consultant, maybe they're doing physical therapy, they have a strength and conditioning coach. There's all these people. So there's the sport coach. You can encourage them to use that network, right, just in how we're describing those things. Now, it's also really important to tailor the type of support we're providing to the individual. Okay, so there's different needs. Okay, the thought that I just had on this is that it from the sort of relationship world of intimate relationships is there's people have different love languages. Okay, which just the idea there is that they just need different things. They speak different language. The type of support that you provide is going to be is not going to be, if you just provide one type of support, it may not be the right type of support for every athlete. Some might want more emotional support. Some might want more informational support. Some might want more tangible support. So we need to make sure that we know what it is they need. Then we tailor that for them. Okay, so if they're a younger athlete, they may need more emotional support, whereas an more experienced athlete, maybe they need more informational support. Whatever it is, we need to know our audience, know our athletes who we're working with, and make sure that we are providing what they actually need. Okay, so we do all of these things, and hopefully we're creating an environment that fosters intrinsic motivation. As if we leverage what it is we can do as coaches, this can be one of those outcomes. And this is something that I learned from my dad when I was a young athlete. Is he was such a powerful motivator, and one of his, because he was a high school tennis coach, and one of the strongest, most powerful messages that he shared with me is about his role as a coach is to motivate athletes, is to be a source of motivation, find a way to foster that intrinsic motivation. And for him, it was to teach athletes to love the game, to learn to love the game. And so in order to do this, though, we have to understand motivation, right? It's obviously a key to influencing our athletes, particularly intrinsic motivation, because that's the highest form of self-determination, where the athlete, that's what drives them. It's their pure love of the sport, the satisfaction that they get from playing, just doing it itself. It's not some extrinsic factor where they're doing it because their parents says they want to do it, or they want to do it for the accolades or these other things. It's they're doing it to try and get a college scholarship or all of those. And there's nothing wrong with those reasons. It's just those aren't intrinsic reasons. They're doing it. Intrinsic means they're doing it for the love of the game. And as coaches, our ultimate goal should be to foster and enhance this intrinsic motivation. And so our behavior and communication, the things that we say, it's directly linked to whether we build this or we undermine it. So what we reinforce, what we emphasize, what it is that we talk about can either take away from this or can build it up. And so very, very important to understand our role in that, and really try to teach kids to love it for its own sake. And so related to intrinsic motivation is really, we can look at the motivational climate. Okay, we want to foster intrinsic motivation. So what type of climate are we trying to create? And when I say climate, I'm referring to just the way that a coach influences an athlete's motivation through the types of practices that they're creating and the types of feedback that they're providing. Okay, and so we can really categorize climates into two broad categories. We can say there's a mastery climate or a more of a performance or ego centered climate. So in a mastery climate, the coach is celebrating or encouraging things like effort and personal growth and skill improvement. Okay, so the success is defined by personal bests. Whereas a performance climate, or ego oriented, outcome oriented climate, there's different ways you can see that. It's defined, success is defined by winning, outperforming others, or how we compare to others. That's an ego component. Okay, and this isn't to say that winning is unimportant. Winning is obviously important, striving for that. But a mastery climate is what is linked to more positive outcomes that are associated with intrinsic motivation, that enjoyment, that persistence, that reduced anxiety, those sorts of things. And so again, what is it that coaches are emphasizing? If they're only emphasizing the winning, beating other people in the social comparison, then that's going to create more of that performance climate. If it's more focused on effort, personal improvement, and learning, or maybe even you can have somewhat of a mix between those two things, but what do we emphasize more? What is the ultimate takeaway there? Because coaches have a tremendous influence on that. They are the primary driver for the climate that gets created at practices and competition for athletes. So essential to be aware of this not only in what it is currently, but how our behaviors are affecting it. Okay, and so then one more thing that I want to mention to kind of tie it all together is we want to foster intrinsic motivation. We want to create that optimal climate. Well, here's a classic tool, self-determination theory, that gives you just a formula. That's one way to think about it, where we need to satisfy the three basic psychological needs in order to create that climate and foster that intrinsic motivation. And these three basic needs are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And when a coach's behavior satisfies these needs, that's when an athlete's intrinsic motivation and well-being are enhanced, which is obviously what we want. Okay, so for an example here, we want to give an athlete a choice in a drill, or say, hey, I'm thinking about these two drills, which one do you want to do? Okay, they're both going to accomplish what it is you want as a coach, but now you gave them a choice. So you satisfied their autonomy. Okay, we can enhance their competence by giving some effective feedback on a skill that's building that competence, right? Help them, only push them as hard as they need to be pushed, not farther than they need to. Like if their ability level is at, let's say it's at a 6, you don't push them to get it to a 10 right away. You push them to get it to a 6.5 first, and then to a 7. It's incremental. Okay, and that's how you build competence. And then relatedness, you're fostering that positive team culture. Okay, building that environment, that sense of belonging, that connection that they have. And so as coaches, if we support these three things, that's how we're creating that optimal and influential environment, that mastery climate that we want. So to summarize everything that I've shared here, just remember, effective coaching is built on three primary pillars that I went over: the relationship piece, the support, and influence. So strong coach-athlete and team relationships, those are the things that are creating that foundation of trust. So the social support that we're providing as athletes, it's obviously going to impact their well-being. And the way that we influence our athletes' motivation, if we're creating a mastery focused climate in particular, that will determine not only their success, but whether they stay engaged in the sport long term, which is obviously something that we want. So when we prioritize these human elements, that's when we move beyond simply coaching a sport. And now we're truly developing the whole athlete. Now we're developing humans. So good stuff there. Thanks for listening. I enjoyed presenting it to you. Hopefully you got a lot out of it. Have an awesome day.
Thank you for listening to this recording in the Sports Psych Lecture Series. I hope you learned something. More importantly, I hope you learned something that you can apply in your life. Feel free to share this presentation with others who might be interested. And if you're interested in more content like this, visit the Fehr Advantage channel on YouTube, or find the Fehr Advantage podcast on Spotify, or visit my website at fehradvantage.com.